Today we're going to do something I never thought we would do on this channel, and it's a book haul. No, like a real book haul this time. I promise. There's over 20 books. Stay tuned. For those of you who have been following the channel, you guys know I didn't even realize what a book haul was. I only bought one book this month. I thought I did. I even tried one. It turns out I kind of had it wrong. I apologize for that. But what I have for you today is an honest-to-goodness, legitimate book haul with over 20 books. But here's the thing. I don't have the budget to go out and buy brand new books or limited editions or any of those awesome books that I love watching other people open and unbox and put on their shelves. I wish I had that budget, but I don't. But what I can do is a book haul on a budget. And I do that all the time. I do that a couple ways. One, I look for sales. I look for fundraisers. We have those a lot in my area. So some of the books you're going to see today came from a fundraiser for my children's school. They solicited a bunch of donations for books, and then they sold them at dirt cheap prices. And so I got about 10 books from that. The other thing that we have here in the Nashville area is McKay's. For those of you who are unfamiliar with McKay's, I'm going to talk about it a little more later in the video. Let me just say that McKay's is a used bookstore, but it's so much more than that. I'll give you more details in a minute, but it is an institution in and of itself. It is a journey. It is a wonderful experience. And so I got about, I think it was 11 books from that. So 21 books in total. They're all used books, but they're in great condition, and we're going to go through those now. So first, we're going to look at the books I got from this fundraiser at my kids' school. There's one thing to note about these. About half of them are young adult or even younger than that. So I've got some that are young adult, but I've got several that are even younger than that. So maybe like that middle school aged range. And I got those books intentionally. I got them for me, and I'm going to tell you why I get those books. So a lot of times when I'm reading these really big books, The Blade itself, or anything in the Mistborn series, or any of those 700 to 1,000 page books, eventually those kind of feel like a grind. Well, I shouldn't say eventually. A lot of times those feel like a grind. And so I break that up by reading some of these younger kids' books, which they're amazing. They're really great books. A lot of them are fantastic. But I can also break out of any kind of reading slump I may be in using them. They're books that I can share with my kids, which I really enjoy. And that's both my familial kids, and I work with a lot of kids in my job. And so it's really fun for me to be able to share those books with kids. And so I got a lot of them in this book sale. And so I'm going to share those with you. But I want you to know those are for me. Now, the books that I got from McKay's, those are all more older books. I think I may have one young adult fiction in there, but the rest of those are just fantasy and science fiction. So if you bear with me through some of these young kids' books, which still look totally awesome and totally cool, then you'll get to see some of the older books, or the books aimed at adults, here in just a minute. First up, from Neil Patrick Harris. Yes, that Neil Patrick Harris of How I Met Your Mother fame, or for those of you in my generation, you may remember him as Doogie Howser. That Neil Patrick Harris, fantastic actor, also an author. And so he wrote a series of books, The Magical Misfits being the first in I think it's a quartet. So I saw that. I have seen this before, and so I was interested to see if I would enjoy Neil Patrick Harris as an author as much as I enjoy him as an actor. And so I picked this one up to give a try out someday when I don't have a lot else to read, to be honest. This isn't very high on my TBR, but it is something that I've always been interested in reading. So we'll see when I get to that. Next up is a book that has been on my TBR probably longer than just about any book, at least my official TBR, where I started keeping track of that stuff. And that is Tunnels. Tunnels is a book that I tried to get some of my older kids to read so that I would have an excuse to read it with them. But when I saw this at the sale, I said, you know what? I don't need an excuse to read it. I can just read it because I want to. So this is a book that I think came out in the early 2000s, kind of in the same era as Holes and some of those other really popular I don't know if it's considered juvenile fiction, but I'm super excited to read this one because I've always heard good things about it. And come on, check out that cover. It's totally awesome. But speaking of awesome covers, I have never heard of this book before, but when I saw the cover, I thought it may be the single coolest cover I have ever seen in any kind of book, and that is The League of Seven by Alan Gratz. I saw this and I said, I have to check out what this book is about. It looks pretty cool. It's kind of like a steampunkish band of misfits banding together, adventure, save the world kind of thing. I don't know all the details. It is the first in a series, but I don't know how many books are in the series. I don't know if it's 3 or 4. I don't know. But League of Seven, I'm totally excited by this cover. I think it's one of the coolest covers I've ever seen in a book. And so I will probably read this one sooner rather than later because I am intrigued by cool covers. So before I show you the next book, I got to tell you about a little problem I ran into with a couple of my books. So I would find these books, they would look intriguing. I would look up reviews online. They would get really good reviews. This one in particular had awesome reviews. And so I would get it. And then when I got home, I realized this one, for example, is book 2 in a trilogy, and I have never read the first one. And I don't know about you, but I can't start off in the middle of a trilogy. But the book I got was The Book Scavenger, The Unbreakable Code. Again, it had amazing reviews online. It was very, very highly rated, and so I was super excited to read it, and I was going to put it on my TBR list for April, because that's how excited I was. But then when I realized it was book 2 out of 3, I went, oh dear. And so I'm going to have to figure out a way to track down the first book at least, and I'll read that, and then I'll read this. And, you know, because you got to go in order. I don't know anyone who can read just the middle of a trilogy. That's insanity. But so the Book Scavenger series looks pretty cool. I've never heard of it before. I don't even think it's fantasy. I just think it's kind of a mystery, but I will find out more about that when I get the first book. Now, the next book I got is book 3 in a trilogy, but I realized that when I got it, and that is Brandon Sanderson's Calamity. That is book 3 in the Reckoners series. I did realize this totally when I saw it. I said, oh, that's book 3, but I got it anyway because sometimes it's hard for me to track down some of these books, and when you can get it for $2, that's a total bargain. So this one will not be on my TBR anytime soon, but, you know, it's a series that I intend on reading eventually. Next up, I'm going to try to show you all 4 books in this 4-book series. That's right, I got Cassandra Clare's City of Bones series. For those of you who have been following me on Goodreads, you realize I just finished off the Renegades series by Marissa Meyer. And so I got this thinking I may jump into another popular young adult series here later in the year. And so I've got my eye on that one. I'm super excited. The truth is I don't know a bunch about that one, and I've never read Cassandra Clare, but everyone who saw that I was reading Marissa Meyer, they were like, well, you got to read Cassandra Clare next. So here I go. And last but not least from the book sale, the one that I was most excited to get because I got it for $2 is Robin Hood from Howard Pyle. But this is the Barnes & Noble limited edition, which I know they're not like the most sought after. They're mass produced like any kind of paperback, or at least that's what it would seem like. But I'm a huge Robin Hood fan. He is probably my favorite character of all time. He is the one that I idolized being when I was a little kid. I have read this book before when I was very, very young. Or much younger than I am now. I'm super excited to read this again, and I will probably do that. If I don't do that in April, I will probably do it in May. Super, super excited to have gotten this copy of Robin Hood. So now let's talk about the books I got at McKay's. Now, for those of you who aren't from the Nashville area, or maybe you are from the Nashville area, but you still are unfamiliar with McKay's, McKay's is this amazing used bookstore, but it's so much more than just used books. They do used books, used comic books, used music, board games, Legos, those Funko Pop characters. They just kind of about anything you can think of that may have some kind of resale value, they do. Again, primarily books. But my favorite thing about McKay's is that I can find some really good hidden gems in there, some books that I wouldn't otherwise be able to get. So the majority of the books that I read come from either my local library or from books that I get off the Libby app. And again, I don't have a big budget to go out and buy books, but the result is that sometimes there's these really fantastic books that I really want to read, but I can't get a hold of them. And so I go to McKay's because a lot of times I can find some hidden gems, and I totally scored with this trip, and I'm going to show you that. I'm super excited to show you a few of the books that I got. I try to go about once every other month or so. It's not right next door to me. It is a little bit of a drive, but it's great because I can take some of the books that I have read, I can bring them there, get store credit, and use that store credit to purchase books. With that said, at the end of 2022, I cleaned out a ton of my book collection and brought it to McKay's and sold it for store credit. And I did that for a few reasons. One, a lot of the books were old. I had read them. They weren't in great condition. Also, we were rearranging some stuff here in the house, and so I didn't have as much bookshelf space as I wanted. And so I got about $150 worth of credit or something like that. I don't remember. I did use that to purchase some gifts for some other people. And so at the beginning of 2023, I had $100 in store credit at McKay's, and I've used some of that. Going into this excursion, I had about $72 worth of in-store credit, and I brought some books and got an additional $26 worth of in-store credit. So I was back to almost $100 worth of credit. I didn't spend all of that, but I did spend a good chunk on it to get this group of books. And so I spent about $44. I got 11 books, so it's about, I think math is hard. So what is that, $4.40 per book on average? Some of them are a little more expensive, some of them are kind of cheap. We'll talk about McKay's pricing when we get to one of the other books because it's relevant. But I'm super excited to show you these books, so let me do that. I've mentioned several times on the channel that one of my all-time favorite authors ever in the entire world is Mike Resnick. And so every time I go to a used bookstore, be that McKay's or elsewhere, the first thing I do is I try to find every Mike Resnick book that I can. He was a super prolific author in the 80s and 90s, or maybe even a little before then. He did recently pass away in 2020, but I think he left a legacy of something like 80 books. And so on my bucket list of things to do before I kick the bucket is hopefully to read all of his books. You guys may realize that I'm currently in the middle of reading his Starship series, but I got these four, and I think it may be that I already had a copy of Soothsayer, but I got these four books. Super excited. So I got Oracle, I got Soothsayer, and then Walpurgis 3, which I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, and then The Soul Eater. And these books were written in the 70s and 80s, or maybe before that. Let's take a look. 1981, 1982. Oracle was written in 1992, and Soothsayer was written in 1991. So the 80s and 90s. So I said 70s and 80s. I am mistaken. It was the 80s and 90s, but what is time to someone who is old as I am? Next up is an author that has like a really good cult following. I've never really met anyone who's read one of his books that didn't like it, but he's not quite as popular as I would think that he would be, and that is Tim Powers. And so I don't always look for his books, but I do kind of keep an eye out for him. I've only read maybe 2 of his books, including Drawing of the Dark, which I really, really liked. So I saw this one and I decided to pick it up. I think this Alternative Routes, I believe this is part of a series, kind of like not necessarily one that you have to read one right after the other, but something maybe more along the lines of Terry Pratchett's Discworld, or dare I say the Dresden Files, which I do think you should read in order, but you can pick one of them up and still get a satisfying read. And so I'm excited to read another Tim Powers book. For those of you who have read Tim Powers in the past, leave me a comment below. Let me know how much you like them. Every time I meet someone who's read Tim Powers, they really, really love him. I don't ever have someone say, yeah, no, he's not my cup of tea. So let me know. Let me know in the comments below. Tim Powers, good or bad? I'm looking for that one person who's like, yeah, I've read him, but he's no bueno. So let me know. Next up is a book I had never heard of, but I was totally drawn to by the cover, and that is Ghosts of Karnak by George Mann. I was super excited to pick up this book until I realized it is book 3 in a 4-book series. So I messed that up. But I think the other books look really cool too. So this one kind of reminded me, the cover reminds me of The Shadow. And for those of you who don't know what The Shadow is, it was an old-timey radio show that you can probably find some of those episodes maybe on YouTube or something like that. I know I've listened to several of them somewhere on the internet. The Shadow was this kind of awesome radio show. I think they made it into a movie starring Alec Baldwin, but I don't think that was very good. But this cover reminds me of that so much, so I was super excited to kind of take a stab at this. It may have to be pushed down on my TBR list quite a distance because I don't know when I'll get a chance to find the other two. I've kind of briefly looked for them, and I didn't see that I could find them anywhere easily, but I'll keep looking. Next up is a book that caused an old man moment right in the middle of McKay's. I picked up Riverworld by Philip Jose Farmer. I was super excited about it, but you can see at the top here it says something about an exciting new series on sci-fi, Riverworld, an exciting new series on sci-fi. And I was like, what are you talking about? That series is old. And then I realized I was in a used bookstore, so I kind of had to chuckle at myself. But I remember watching that series on Sci-Fi. It was like a limited edition series or something like that. And I kind of liked it. And so I was excited to see this. And this little tagline brought back that memory. And so I thought I'd pick it up. But this is really a collection of two books that were released in 1971. This was a re-release in, I think, 2010 when that series came out. And so I'm excited to read both of these together as one Riverworld. And we'll check that out maybe later this year. I think I found a really cool indie release there at McKay's, and that is Mark of the Raven by Morgan Busse. I don't know how to say this last name, Busse. If you know how to pronounce it, please leave me a comment and give me some hyphenetics or something like that so that I can pronounce it right. I hate mispronouncing people's names, even though I do it all the time. So anyway, Mark of the Raven, I saw the cover, said this looks pretty cool, looked it up online, gets really good reviews. I can't remember if it's a trilogy or a 4-book series, but I know there's several books in this series. I'm excited to read this one. It feels really cool. It's got a really great cover. I'm excited to read it. Before I show you the next book, I need to tell you a little bit about McKay's pricing because it played a factor into my decision to buy this book, although it was maybe not the best decision I've ever made. But the way McKay's works is and this is not an official statement on behalf of McKay's, this is the way I perceive McKay's to work. Sometimes you will find some of their books are overpriced. And when I mean overpriced, I mean they are used books that cost more at McKay's than the sticker price of going to buy a new one. So for example, I saw a Dresden Files book that retailed for $6.99. It was being sold at McKay's for $7.50. I think part of that is because the demand for that book is high, and so they know they can charge more, and they have people who will pay more for really good quality books. But also, I think people will pay an inflated price sometimes because they have store credit and they can't spend that store credit anywhere else. So with that in mind, I used some slightly warped logic to finalize the decision to buy this book. And that book is The Red Knight by Miles Cameron. Now, this one was significantly higher priced than a lot of the other books, and so with combining that knowledge with some of the reviews that I saw online, I took it to mean that this book is in high demand because it's really, really good. I don't see a single flaw in my logic, not a single one. And so I know almost nothing about this book other than it was priced high and it got good reviews. The end. I'm going to read this sometime. I bet it's awesome. I'm super excited to find this book. This is exactly what I go to McKay's for. I got Graceling by Kristen Kishore at McKay's. This is a book that I have tried to find in my library and on the Libby app before, and I can't find it. But funny story. I got the book. I brought it home. I was super excited. My daughter looked at it and said, "Oh, that book is totally awesome. I remember reading it. It used to be on my bookshelf." And then I went, "Oh dear. This may actually be the exact copy that I sold to McKay's a few months back." Not all my decisions are great, but I'm still super excited to read it. And my daughter says it's awesome, so I'm probably going to read this sooner rather than later. And last but not least, a book that I probably would not be able to read unless I could find it at a used bookstore. And I was crazy excited to find this one. And that is Becky Chambers' The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. I have read about this book. I think it is, I'm hoping that it is something that really kind of tickles my fancy, that it fits my preferences. And I'm super excited to try it out. I hear mostly good things about it, although I can acknowledge that not everyone loves it. However, This is one that's been on my list for a while, but I couldn't figure out a way to track it down. So this was the first book I saw when I walked into McKay's, and I snatched it up immediately. Super excited to have it. And so I will probably be reading this over the summer. So there you go, a true and honest, legitimate book haul, and a book haul on a budget at that. I spent $20 at the book fair. I don't really view that even as spending the money because it's going to a good cause. So I kind of feel like that's a donation, but it's a totally cool donation because in return for that, I get 10 books that I really, really want to read. And then I spent about $44 in store credit at McKay's. I have about $55 left in store credit, so I will go back and use that sometime in the future. My hope is that with some of the books I bought today and some of the books that I still have laying around the house, I will continually be able to bring books back to McKay's, get more store credit, take books away from McKay's, and continue that cycle until I have absolutely zero store credit left. But hopefully that will mean I have read a bajillion books in the meantime. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you like this video even a tiny, tiny bit, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. Also know that we do book reviews every week here. So if you're looking for a book to read, tune in every Tuesday. I put out a book review. If you want to see what books I'm reading or what books I will be reading in the future or what books I will be doing reviews on here in the near future, please follow me on Goodreads. The link for all of that stuff is down in the description below. Thank you so much, and I will see you again soon.